most pressing issues comes back to something that Healing the Culture presents so profoundly and beautifully, which is authentic human nature. And you probably know where I'm headed, which is the denial of a human nature that is gendered. And so the very profound and important truth that God made us male and female is under attack in like a tidal wave and an onslaught of pressure and policies and now laws and from the medical community. What would you say to parents, to Catholics that are listening here about the way in which we are to stand up with the fullness of the truth entrusted to us about human nature?
Well, there are three approaches that you can take. One is a biological approach. The second is a theological approach. And the third is what I would call an emotional health or psychological approach. And, to each, to the questions you raised. So first of all, let's just take the biological approach. There is no genetic basis, none, no brain physiological basis to establish transgenderism as being part of human nature. So the idea of a man being trapped in a woman's body or a woman being trapped in a man's body, there is no biological basis or genetic basis for this. It simply is erroneous to assert anything else. At best, then, it is a psychological wish. It is not an intrinsic desire or an intrinsic or urgent motivating force from within, as if it were biologically stimulated. So that's the first thing. So there is no physiological basis for transgenderism. There's some very good articles on this. You might want to take a look at an article by Richard Fitzgibbons, Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons, and two other authors. It was written in the National Catholic Bioethics Quarterly about, I'd say it's about 10 years old now anyway, but it's on sexual reassignment surgery. It's a very long article. I think it's about 60 pages or something, but well worth the read, because it breaks down a lot of these different, supposed biological bases. There's another one by Lawrence Mayer and Paul McHugh, two professors at Johns Hopkins University. They wrote a study, I guess it was maybe about 6-7 years ago anyway. It was, again, looking at the biological basis for transgenderism and pretty much saying this, there's no way there's a biological basis for this. So let's just take that off the proverbial academic stage. The second thing is the theological basis for this. I don't have to, he made them male and female. He created them. Now, however you want to interpret that, I think that's a very profound statement, not just biologically, but theologically. And I think, there's a, adequate justification for that in not an encyclical, in a teaching, a letter that was put forward by, I believe it was the Vatican Commission on Education. It was about, again, about 10 years ago. He made the male and female as the name of the letter. And you can just put Vatican, he made the male and female, and you can see the theological justification. And the position of our church is very clear on this. So I don't think I have to go into the theological. The emotional health dimension of it, gets us to the real causes. What's the real cause of transgenderism? And I think the real causes are several. And they can be and are frequently a blend of 4 major causes. First, in between 40 to 60%, depending on the study you're using, 40 to 60% of the children, this is the pre-adolescents, who have a cross gender confusion or have a desire to, become the other sex, 40 to 60% have been physically or sexually abused as children. So that is a huge factor. And just keep this in mind. There's got to be anxieties that are associated with physical and sexual abuse. But oftentimes this is combined with a second major cause, namely significant anxiety in the household. So in the case of boys who want to become girls, that we see the anxiety level is on the mom, in the mother in the household, and the boy says, well, this is my fault that my mother is so anxious and my mother is so unhappy. And she is unhappy, right? We're talking about a 4 or 5-year-old here, right? She's unhappy because I'm the wrong sex. She wishes she had a girl, and she really, it's the boy in me that she's upset about. If I just get this fixed, I'll make my mother happy and I will be happier. So, and it's the reverse with the girl, the anxiety on the part of the father. If I just get, he hates me being a female, rather have a boy, etc. So that is oftentimes a secondary anxiety that's mixed in with oftentimes physical and sexual abuse. You put those two together and the storm is already brewing. A third major cause, at least probably at least 50% of the cases, is latent homosexual desires becoming more and more explicitly manifest. And so an inability to handle that and thinking if I just become the other sex, that fixes it. I'm not, going to be looking for the same sex. I'm looking for another, the regular, I'll be quote unquote heterosexual once again. Again, we're looking at a kid's interpretation, which of course is undeveloped intellectually and emotionally. So that's a third major thing. And then oftentimes, you do have parents who really do explicitly say, I would have rather had a boy or a girl, and the poor little kid has to live up to, the expectation, or the mother that dresses the little boy up in girls' clothes, et cetera, and expresses, even a female name for the little boy. Well, you put together all the anxieties that are associated with these behaviors to the little kid, right? Or in the case is, the homosexual desires that might be there. You put them all together and you've got a massive ball of anxiety that is going on. Now, what a therapist would tell you right away is the way to treat that is not to give the child what the child believes is the solution to this huge anxiety bomb that they are feeling interiorly. In other words, if I just get a sex change, it'll all be fixed. The way out of it, right, is going to happen by getting therapy to help the child see the solution is not changing your sex, right? Because if you can show them that the anxiety can be solved without having a sex change, they just go back to their biological sex. And by the way, about 81% with no therapy or minimal therapy will just go back to their biological sex if you don't pressure them into getting a sex change or keep telling them that the solution is a sex change when they're pre-adolescents, right? Because if they move into their adolescence believing that the sex change is the answer, the odds of you dissuading them at that juncture are very difficult. But if you can handle this and get the therapy there before adolescence, you can have successful, oftentimes very successful alleviation of cross-gender confusion, as well as a solution to the anxiety problem. Now, here's the problem of the sex change. Let's suppose, and this is why I think it's medically unethical. The reason is because let's suppose the child says, I want the sex change, the parent accommodates, everybody's accommodating, pushing them along. Well, will they feel relief after the sex change? Yes, they will. They're going to feel a great relief of the anxiety for 3 to 5 years after the surgery. But about 5 years after the surgery, the anxieties will re-emerge, almost like a cancer that re-emerges for the second time with a, kind of a great viciousness, right? It comes right out and it starts really manifesting itself powerfully. And of course, then that means that the sex change was not the solution to the anxiety. All of a sudden, the anxiety reappears with the sex change, which causes buyer's remorse. In other words, the person now, this is the post-adolescent, now says, oh, wait a minute, gosh, I still feel all these terrible anxieties. I've permanently, maimed myself. There's no turning back. And now the buyer's remorse starts. And at this juncture, what you find is that the rate of depression and anxiety just accelerates tremendously. 20 years after the surgery, 10 years after the surgery has been completed, you can expect to find between a 19 times to 20 times increase in the suicide rate from the general population. 19 times, that's 1,900% or 2,000% increase in suicides for those who have had the sexual reassignment surgery. Do you think that's ethical? I don't think that's ethical. I think that's medically very unethical. And I think, honestly, we need to reflect not only as a medical and academic community, we need to reflect as a nation, look straight on at the consequences of what is going on here. All the anxieties that we are leaving untreated by giving a false solution, which may make some doctors a whole lot of money and may make some post-adolescents and parents happy for 5 years. I'm telling you, there is a strong increase that they will not be happy after 5 years after the surgery. And so, again, I caution people that this is a false solution and that much of what is going on here is not psychologically or medically warranted, that in fact, this is politically motivated, and it's motivated, in my view, toward a subjectivist view of human identity, which brings me into a whole other question, which I won't get into right now. But no, I don't think it's a good idea. Spiritually, it's a lousy idea. Emotionally, it's a lousy idea. And there's no biological basis for it whatsoever. So I'm against it. I challenge it ethically. And I think it should be absolutely looked at soberly, scientifically, psychologically. We need to depoliticize this issue, get rid of that subjectivist identity issue, and come back to looking at some facts and what's really good for our young people and what's really good for our culture and nation.